Hi, everyone, and welcome to the top 5 elements of a successful packout. I'm Audra Katowski, and joining me today is Kris Rzesnoski. Kris is a well-known restoration expert, a certified contents loss specialist, a water loss specialist, and he holds all 3 IICRC Master Restorer designations. In 2013, Kris was the primary consultant, along with the accounting firm Deloitte, who looked at the pricing crisis in Canada and the problems with unit pricing. He's going to be leading today's webinar as he explains how you can crush your contents packout. Just before we get started, though, I would like to share that if you have any questions, just type them into the chat box and we'll answer them if there's a chance along the way or at the end of the webinar. All right, Kris, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Audra. Hey, good day, everyone. Today's topic is the top 5 elements of a successful packout. Over the course of the last few years, I've had the pleasure working with some of the best restorers in the industry. I've traveled around, looked at their shops, got to talk and meet with staff, and we reviewed a bunch of processes when we were developing the program at Encircle. And this is a combination of goals and skills that resulting in a great packout. I also have had the chance to be working with some of the training companies and suppliers that specifically work with contents, like Barb Jackson's Total Contents, Fireline Systems, and some of the IICRC trainers who are exploring the importance of contents. It's really the one area in your business that you can capitalize to improve your company's reputation. And we'll go through that today and show you how. So contents are an important aspect of most restoration jobs. Some would even argue that they're actually the most important part of the job. With people's emotional ties to their possessions, the things they've been given, the things they've acquired, or just the things they've purchased can have a huge value to their identity and their self-worth. And if you guys have been in the business long enough that you know that contents are very personal. It's your style, it's your value system, and it can mean everything to a person. So if you look at this bookshelf here, you see these high-end cabinets, great painting job on them, but where the real value sits in there is the memories that are sitting on the shelves, items that you've collected, those items where you collected them is going to have value. And even if you look down to the pillows on the bench there, that represents somebody's individual style. So in the restoration world, it's unfortunate, but we often overlook contents and see it as a nuisance, and generally is treated as an afterthought. The restorer who sets the team mindset that contents done right will make or break a claim will be the restorer that finds the best customer improvement in their customer service. You'll find the most improved profitability in your business, and you also find that you have customers that will fall in love with your company. All those things on the shelves are things that people really care about. Yeah, they love their house, but they really care about those memories. When we talk about why mindset's important, it's how you approach a claim, and it's with empathy and caring and understanding, but it's recognizing that the small things you do with their possessions can really deliver big results in the customer service wins. You have to ask yourself, does your company realize the importance of your contents team and what they play to the restoration success of that entire project? Or do the teams look at the items or possessions as high value emotional ties to your customer? The trouble that might appear when you're going into a job is you're running into the restorer might not know what's valuable. So in this photo, you're looking at a couch that doesn't appear to be any great significant value, but if that was a couch that came from someone's mother or grandmother, it may have an emotional tie that doesn't have a monetary tie to it. There's no monetary value. And when we look at the importance of contents in the restoration job, you have to look at those possessions have high value emotional ties. Those are where you're going to get your wins as a restorer, and they pay for mistakes down the road. In trying to find those valuable items, you can't just ask one person in the house, because to different people, it's going to be different things. It could be an old chair, a towel, a stuffed animal. It's not always obvious to the restorer which ones are valuable and which ones aren't. And when you begin working with a customer, some of the restorers that had some really great processes that they go, let's say a traditional family, you might have a husband that really enjoys his golf clubs, and that's the most important thing in the garage that needs to come out. the wife has the heritage jewelry that she's focused on, or some artwork from family. And then you have the kids that they have a stuffed animal or blanket that matters the world to them. If you can pick those out, you're able to start getting those wins into your company. And I think it's really important when we talk about having a successful pack out, it's capturing what's valuable to those insureds or those customers. See, customers in their items matter. And the reality is that, we're people that deal with emotions, and most of us in the restoration industry live in a little bit of a dark humor environment. It's not uncommon to look at a loss and joke around with it, or to have a sinister view of how some people live. But that's a way of seeing people's destruction and emotionally detaching yourself from the work that you have to cope with. And restorers don't necessarily focus on the stress that seeing a family lose everything does to your workers. So when you hear those off-color jokes, that typically is just a response, as a normal response to people that are dealing with difficult situations. But it's not easy, because you have some people that are completely disengaged from the process, and that can make life difficult for your teams. You have people that are going through traumatic events, and they're either completely disengaged or they're really over engaged, and your contents teams will see that, which is sort of the two ends of the spectrum. And this is very common among hoarders. Every water bottle is important. Every item in the house has a high value and a significant value to their worth. And those are difficult situations to deal with. But how you act and how you treat them is the difference between winning and losing that client's trust. When we look here, when a loss happens, you have to look at it as a traumatic event. I was in Australia, and there was a psychologist that talked about the emotional devastation of having a loss, whether it be a water damage where the home's completely repairable, but the emotional level to a person is the equivalent of having a death of a friend or family member. And in many cases, if you have a fire and they lose possessions, those are like losing the memories of long ago, or the best times of their lives. And so it's your place, it's your home, it's where you feel most secure. Now you feel vulnerable, and that bad things can happen to you. And through that little window of weeks that happens, that can really pull at the heart and soul of a customer, because you don't know, is that their business? Did they just hit financial ruin? Because if it's not that they lost a shop, but maybe they can't survive the financial hit. The restorer needs to understand the emotion that goes with that, and treat it with empathy, and understand the decisions people make at the beginning of the claim might be very clouded. But people tend to make jokes when you're uncomfortable, and we know that as restorers. This is our everyday business. But then there's times that we'll make jokes to deal with the emotional situation. And I focus on this because it's a little different when you're traumatized. If someone lost a family member, you wouldn't joke about it. And if you heard jokes about something serious like that, it would set you off. It'd be the inappropriate response to do. But our workers feel uncomfortable. The homeowner's traumatized. You have two very different approaches to dealing with that. So it's critical that you have a policy to train your staff on how to deal with this when it happens. We had a job, and what I want to do is just sort of share with you some of the difficult situations that a team might run into. And if you've been in the business, you've come across people in their rooms. In my time, we found hidden sex rooms, we found personal devices, and observed things that were in the bedroom that I still don't know what they were using them for. But my team and I were in a home, and we found a stash of personal items. Now, we had just gone through a transition internally. We spent some time on training to deal with sensitive situations like this. And I can tell you, before we discussed it, I guarantee someone would have made an off-color joke at that point, because it was some people looking at some stuff that was awkward to be there looking at it, and it was kind of funny. But with the presence of mind where we had talked about the impact to the customer, we had to stop for a minute. You're at this crossroad. If you do something bad, you may not recover from it. And so with the owner in the house, and we had a game plan. If you saw something like this and we came across it, we discreetly left the room. In this case, we had a female homeowner, so we had one of our female staff members take a box to her. and basically said, hey, the guys are busy, but I noticed you have some things in your dresser that you might want to pack yourself. And if not, I can pack them for you, but I just wanted to bring you a box. And with that, our team was equipped with some of that sensitivity training. We prepared for it. We had a plan. Now, if you could imagine the impact on the customer and how they would feel in this situation where you have strangers sitting in your bedroom and they found your personal items. And those are things that you wouldn't want anyone to know about. It's personal. They could be outside the norm, if you can describe it that way. But it's raw, it's sensitive. And then you compound it with the trauma that the client's going through, or the fire or the water loss. And then you compound that with hearing some laughs coming from the room. And if there's a joke made with the owner there, that's the ultimate sign of disrespect, and you lose that trust. So we have restorers who are uncomfortable in dealing with the insured who is traumatized. But I was actually at JC Restoration in Chicago not long ago, and their team deployed the exact same tactic of integrity and comfort. One of the managers there said, hey, look, we all have those items in our rooms, and you can pack them or we can pack them, but you go, girl. And her joke was so well placed and bonded with the customer that event put the customer at ease. And it actually led to the entire claim going really well. And it was a trust building moment that lasted the entire claim. So if you make those mistakes at that point and you do the wrong thing, you're going to have to go to the extra mile to try to make up for it. And you might not be able to.
Hey, Kris, we just got a question that came in. John asks, you talk about the sensitive stuff, but how do you handle a male-female interaction or vice versa?
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. You do it carefully. I haven't personally. We had a female homeowner. Again, you find stuff, right? And you have to ask them to maybe step aside. We had an all-male crew on the site, and I just pulled her aside, said, hey, we found some stuff, and my team's not there. Do you want to go pack it, or do you mind if our guys do it? We did a university where we got the female dorms, and I preemptively went room to room with a box that was marked personal and private. And then when I got a chance to talk to people, the women that were there, it was, hey, if there's some things that you want to clean up, photos, personal items that you wouldn't want your mom to find, you probably don't want my team to find them. You can put them in the box. We can clean them or we can replace them. But nobody needs to know about it. Just put it in this box and then mark throw out or clean, and we'll get it back to you. And it's not easy. I don't think there's an easy way to deal with it. But if you have a game plan, it's a lot easier if you come in with that mindset. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's how we've approached it in the past. So the next key step is management, and there's two types of management that you need to focus on. One is the department. It's either content or mitigation, and in smaller companies, your contents team is normally tucked in under the mitigation manager, and is usually, but not always, thought of as a process after the thought or after the event happens. But a contents manager dedicated to the performance and execution of the contents from start to finish, you can maintain that high-end level of service. And when you start to manage down, if you start managing the job and determine the tempo and the quality and how you execute in the field, those are the things that really matter, and your customer sees. So you have to ask, what's the goal of the management team? Is it how much impact do you want to have on the customer? Or how are you going to increase the customer service? Does the manager believe in your brand? And in almost all of the restoration disciplines, content is probably the one where you have to be most brand focused. How do you present yourselves around the contents matters as much about what you're doing as how you're doing it. They need to represent the part of the caring technician where the first impression will make the biggest difference. And nobody worries about you walking in their house, stealing their windows or stealing their doors. They worry about stealing possessions. So, if the other part of building trust is to show your brand and empower your staff, you need to do that. And I've been with companies, and I've observed companies who do not empower their staff. Just basic human emotion says that workers need to engage with homeowners. And A lot of companies put rules in that say workers cannot talk to homeowners and technicians do not talk about the claim. And while I understand why the companies are protecting themselves from a liability and not saying something that'll get the company in trouble, it really need to focus on how to communicate properly with the owners and the occupants of a building. If your tattoo is teamed up, or if your team is tattooed up, wear a long sleeve shirt. Restorers should be able to talk to the homeowner and talk about the need to advise what they can and can't talk about. Personal relationships in this business is what brings your customer to your company. It's what bonds you to the people that are working on your jobs, that trust. So have a conversation with your staff and say, hey guys, listen, when you don't talk about coverage, we don't talk about what the carrier should and shouldn't pay for. You don't talk about what is and isn't covered. Don't say, here's, this is definitely a high value item. What you can say is like, hey, how are you doing? I'm sorry that we had to meet this way. Is there anything that I can do to assist you? I hear what you're saying. Let me ask my supervisor because they can talk to you a little bit more about the insurance process. Or I love your dog and how old is it, right? Just try to connect personally with the occupants. Don't get into the technicals. When you talk about organization, and this is a common theme that we see with restorers, is you're really in the emergency industry service or emergency service industry. We don't rush in during a fire, nor do we rush in when the bullets are flying. But after that happens, we're there to secure the building. We're there to clean up the loss. We deal with the after effects of a CAT event. But how do you structure your workflow? Content is much like a dance inside a structure. If you know the steps you need to take, you look graceful, you can repeat the process. Repeating the process will drive efficiency. That's why the fire departments and paramedic services are an interesting viewpoint. Their vehicles are set up to handle small to medium losses, very much like our vehicles. If you have a large loss, you need either more vehicles or another type of vehicle to come and help you, or maybe a sub-trade. Are you prepared with your truck? Does it get stocked when you come home? So the fire department, when you come off a call, that truck rolls back in the station and anything that was used is put back on. Anything dirty is clean. Or do you run your shop that way where you're able to then keep that truck in really well equipped, ready to go, so that every time the stuff that you need is there? That time spent keeping the station ready or keeping your shop ready is critical stuff to being able to respond quickly. If you go back to the emergency services, all great contents companies that I've seen have one thing in common, and that's consistency of processes and standards. Now, it doesn't mean that they all do the same thing, but what it is that the trucks are packed and stocked, everything's in the place where you need it, you mobilize to the job site, you get the gear, you know where it is, you know what you need, when you need it, and then items are replaced. But remember, consistency drives profitability, and in contents, this is specifically true because you're doing a repetitive process over and over, and if you can drive that consistency, you're going to drive that efficiency in. When we talk about organization at the field level, it requires you to adapt to many changing environments and mitigating risk. Building systems have a lot of variances that are going to make you work there. So your field supervision is responsible for ensuring the teams are prepared with the task at hand. That means keeping the trucks organized and the shop organized. But it's also about communicating to your customers the differences. If you need to wear PPE, you got to communicate that with the adjuster that, hey, we're wearing full respirators and Tyvek suits. We're going to be slowed down on our working. And do you need additional power, lighting, heat, air conditioning? All of these reactions will slow the job response, but they're required to drive efficiency for the work that you're trying to complete and protect your workers. And what happens is most of the time this doesn't get communicated. So at the billing time, when you submit your invoice, all of a sudden you get hammered with a review saying that's way too many hours. You got to do that proactive approach of letting them know what you're running into. Otherwise, people are going to compare apples and oranges together. And when you have to bring those services into the job site, what's really interesting is that when you bring them in, you're going to have to say, hey, listen, we bring them in so we don't take shortcuts in the field, or the environmental conditions require us to take shortcuts in the field, and we're going to have to then come back and communicate that to the customer because we're going to spend more time at the warehouse organizing the contents in order for us to get out of the field faster. Those are resources we need. They're available. Most insurance companies or property managers don't understand your world. And so if they put constraints on you and your team, you need to break off those constraints by communicating those challenges with the customer. Now, organization sort of trends into how are you working and how are those repeatable systems taking place. So if you start looking at what are your standards for packing and moving items, the great contents companies prevent their staff from moving more than one box at a time. This is true in the moving industry, actually. Large and extra large boxes get 2 workers to move them regardless of the weight. It's just so you're not knocking things over in a house. Hands-on and grip-on possessions is a common practice, right? Hands-on, grip-on a possession is a common practice. And we have big people that work for us. They can lift more in one box. I get it. It doesn't mean they should. You speed up the job at the increased risk to your company. And so when we look at risk, why would your company take on dramatically more risk for every box that they go to move? You need to consider the best practices for moving items and communicate that to your staff. Like if you look at this worker right now, his vision's impaired. If he were to need to look down to his feet, he's got to turn left or right, chance of knocking something off. If he slips, trips, loses his balance, he's going to lose one of those boxes, and it's probably the top one. And this is preventable because each box is critical to the success of your pack out, and you're going to trade quality for speed. The old saying, and I believe it's a military saying that says slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Think about the impact of breaking a box. Everything stops. Managers have to get involved to give explanations to the customer. Reports maybe need to be filled out. People are upset. Clients don't want to pay, and you need to pay and write a check to replace those items. Or you can get paid to move the boxes in a smooth fashion that you don't take on that risk. Does your company have a strategy for building boxes? There's a common joke, and you probably have it, that you're building a box fort in a house or a box city on a commercial job. That's where you just keep the crew going and you just start building boxes. It's a critical step of a really successful pack out. You have one person build boxes, or you can have the whole team build boxes. So we had a policy in our company when we were building contents, and when we had a contents division, we'd build boxes after lunch and after breaks. It gave people a chance to get back in to the mindset of being able to build boxes, get back from lunch, you clear your head, and then you go start doing your job of listing contents. For us, that seemed to work really well. For other companies, you have one person building boxes rather than build as you go. If you're starting your listing, when you start to talk about pack out strategy, do you bring your own plastic tables to the job site? Do you bring lighting? A simple process is get the big stuff out of the way. Get those items out, move the electronics so you're not pulling on cords, and then you can start setting up your tables and then starting to pack out the small stuff. Cover your table with a sheet or a self-adhesive plastic, but I like those white foam pads. You just put those down on top of the table. It's easy, it's non-slip, but you can really quickly change them out. And this will prevent your staff from having to pack on the floor or use the insured seat to sit down on. It's just not the way you want to represent your company. Now, when you look at systems, it's how do you pack? How do you tag? How do you list? How do you ensure everything's off site? And then how do you build trust with the customer? Not to get into the individual systems, but how you pack a box is important. Are you wrapping glassware in plastic? Do you use paper to fill the voids and so that you don't have things broken? Are you packing the box 33% empty so that you have some air gap if it crushes, you don't break stuff? A lot of the times it's how we do things or how we present the image of what we're doing on site that can really improve your customer service, but it also means that you're taking that liability and passing it back. Now, being accountable for your company and your team and the quality of the job starts with everyone in the team, and it's ownership down. But even if you don't have an ownership team that's above you functioning maybe as you think they should, accountability is essentially setting the standard for the people that work with you or below you. And when nobody's watching, how are they going to act when they're confronted with challenges? So this includes going to the job site and making sure you have your checklist set up and making sure you have your policies and procedures for going through dealing with with the situations that are coming up. But you need to be a leader, and there's a saying that there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. It's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. And this quote is something that hits home to me. I personally have talked the talk, but when it came to executing in the field, I failed to hold the team accountable. I failed to hold them accountable to my own beliefs. Different reasons: fear of losing people, fear of upsetting the apple cart. We were busy. Fear of the entrenched norm was going to change was always a risk. I was a manager who walked the warehouse. I picked up coffee cups off the shelves. I'd go gas the truck up myself. Owners do that, managers do that. I'm not alone. I know that people that care do that, but what I did is I enabled my team to fail. I needed to communicate with them what was important and keep the standard. What I failed to do was instill this in my leadership teams below me. So I'll just do it myself because it's easier. No, each leader has to have the ability to control their outcome every day, and you need to be able to take the blame and pass the blame down to people that are responsible. But it's not about passing the blame down to them and saying you're responsible for that. Ultimately, I was responsible. I let it happen. You didn't understand that we don't put coffee cups on shelves, so it's my fault. And no excuses for a team failing. When you fail to get people to follow policy, or they don't pack a certain way, it's on you to change your workplace, and that's what you really need to do.
Hey, Kris, we got a question that just came in.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No worries. Will asks, you say there's no bad teams, only bad leaders. Could you explain what happens when you work with a team that has a lot of new faces?
Well, okay. Yeah, so you've got a lot of, how is this? It comes down to HR retention, and contents unfortunately suffers from probably a higher turnover than maybe some of the other departments. And what some studies have shown, so if you go back and you look at how some studies are focused on, is in content, I wouldn't say we train our staff as much as maybe some of the other divisions. So if you get a contents worker and you're a company that's not focused on contents, it's like, yeah, you can pack up those items, but people stay with companies because they take pride in what they do. What they do needs to feel important. They need to feel empowered. I'd say it's training and setting the standards, which might seem hard, but that's exactly what a great leader is going to do. So, yeah, it's getting people to buy in and have ownership of what they're working on. Will help retain people if they feel that they're valuable. I have been in a company where contents is not a valuable division for the company. That's how it was treated, and people felt that they were unneeded in the company, and that's what drove turnover. The second they became needed, critical part of this team, hey, all of a sudden people started to stick around and they wanted to do better. So I think it has to do with how you treat the division. If we look at breaking items, and this is a pet peeve of every contest department, is something broke, and if we look at it as it's just broken items, we can replace them. It's not the end of the world. That's fine. Or did you drop the baby, right? I can guarantee you it's not acceptable to drop babies at a nursery in a hospital. If you ask any restorer, why is it okay when we damage somebody's possessions? The bigger question is it make you look like you're unprofessional or professional? And you have to figure out why you're breaking stuff. So is it because we pack a box too tight, or we don't put wrapping in there? Is it because we carry too many boxes and one dropped? Did we look at the delicacy of the item and just neglect that needed to be wrapped up and protected? The other thing is, do you stack too many boxes too high? So if they're filled too tight and then they're stacked too tall, that weight can crush down and break stuff. Or do we just forget to wrap it up on a pallet when we're moving it and boxes fell off, right? Once you look at some of the facts of why things break, you can either accept it as accidents happen, or you could say, hey, listen, let's put a process of accountability in place and understand that these items are things that matter a lot to our clients. We need to instill that belief into our staff. A quick method for creating urgency is fixing to fix the break issues is the old adage, what gets measured gets done. So if you have things that are breaking, you record what broke, what time of day it broke, what was the cost of the item, what was the cost of the replacement, how did it impact the customer emotionally, and start to drive some pure consistency in there that you're communicating that's not okay to break. All of a sudden your team is buying into your concept that we take good care of stuff and we make sure we don't break it. If you go back into this webinar, a lot of the tactics of not double stacking boxes and not overpacking is a big thing. And then it comes down to
Hey,
what is
Kris.
the customer? Yeah.
Hey, Kris, sorry to interrupt. We actually got another question in. Joanna asks, how do we as leaders correct bad habits from the past?
Oh, yeah, you know what? And if you're a leader in the business, so it's a great question. How are you going to correct the old habits? Part of it is training. So if you have a team that used to do things one way, I'd say that if you're managing things that are breaking and you say, hey guys, there's a more efficient process, you're going to have to go back to your team and say, here's what it is. You have to get buy-in from that team. Here's why we need to make a change. We need to make a change because we're going to use a new digital system. We're going to make a change because we're going to drive some efficiency and to take some work off your shoulders. Or we're going to make a change because we broke a lot of items and this is a change we need to make to prevent that from happening. A lot of times as a leader in a contents division, you get people that even come in from other companies with, this is how we always did it. And really you need to have that team dialed in with your thought and your process. But if you sit down and you work with your team on, this is the reason why we're doing it, and sell them on the why you're changing it. Changing it just to put your mark on a process is not always effective. But if you can share the why, most people will buy into your why. They won't buy into what you're doing unless you tell them why. And I don't think as leaders in restoration companies, we're maybe the best at sharing why we do things. Maybe we do a little bit more of, I know from my perspective, as I probably did more telling than getting people to buy into it. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question? It's a tough one. We always did this, and I'm open to looking at people's strategies, but that's one. If you made a decision and someone's always done it a certain way, hey, we're changing it because we want to improve our contents division, and that's the decision. Customer satisfaction and reputation for delivering on contents in a claim is the difference between someone who likes your company, someone who hates your company, or someone that absolutely loves your company. I can't tell you enough that the way that you approach a pack out is that, you know, we have the whole cleaning side, what happens at the office, but what you're doing in front of a customer in their home, it's how you carry yourself. That's what's going to drive the difference between a really good customer experience and a very poor one. If you come back to the 5 elements of a successful pack out, and we go through it, and it starts with your culture and building that mindset. It's setting what your belief system is. And then your management team then has to really show the value and the importance of a contents division. You know, every manager should understand it, and project managers should understand how important this is to getting good customer service scores and making these claims really successful. What happens is the higher your customer service score is, the better your profitability becomes. And it requires you as an organization to then have a good organization of your process. You need to make sure you have that dialed in. Even if your systems aren't the same as someone else's, it doesn't mean that it's not repeatable and that your systems are then allowing you to execute on a job in a timely manner. And then it's accountability. And accountability is one of the toughest things to do, because you have to own it, and you have to really own it, and the buck stops with you. If I'm a supervisor on a job, I own the entire job. And if I'm a lead technician on a job, I own the entire job. And if I'm a laborer on the job, I got to own my part of the job. Everybody's responsible for owning it, and that's tough. You have to build that culture, but the accountability is key. And I really think that that's the key to the entire pack out is, yeah, there's the physical training, but at the end of the day, does the team buy into the mindset, and everything else follows to the end where you're accountable for your actions, and we're going to track how many people break stuff. And what you probably find, at least from my experience, is that it's usually the same people that break stuff until you get them called out. And once their name's on a board and the value of the amount of breakages have shown up, usually it stops, or usually it dwindles down. And if you could track it back to a process problem, then you can fix it. So that's what we have today. If you guys, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming out to a session. If you'd like more information about what we do at Encircle, or you want to discuss some operation stuff with us, don't hesitate to take the information down on the screen, reach out to us. Myself or my team would be happy to help you. And if you have any questions about this and you want to ask them now, I'll stick around for a few minutes and answer any questions.
Perfect. Thank you for presenting, Kris, and thank you for our attendees for joining us today. If you'd like to share this webinar with a team member, watch your email because we'll be sending a link to the recording in a few days. Also, if you'll have a chance to ask Kris questions now, or if you'd like, you can send questions to our email at marketing@encircleapp.com, and we'll be happy to help there as well.
It looks like we don't have any questions right now. Hey, again, please don't hesitate to contact us if you need anything. But other than that, have a fantastic day. Really appreciate you guys joining us.